Greetings everybody, I'm Rob Biernacki from Island Top Team. This is Stephan Kesting from grapplearts.com, and this is going to be the final video in our weak side / crossbody rotational control, back attack, control, and attack and back system. We're going to be going over really the thing that you should be trying to do when you're on someone's back, which is choking them and finishing them that way. The choke, as you may or may not know, is the most effective and reliable submission out there. There are people who will choose to continue fighting if you've broken their arm or their leg. Very few people can choose to continue fighting when they're unconscious. So that should be our ultimate goal anyway. So let's say we found ourselves on the weak side here. So let's just rotate a little bit. There we go. So we stepped on the hip. We got to here. We got our Kimura control or our double wrist control, double motorcycle grip, or our claw ride, or our half Nelson. We'll go through entries from kind of every place. We'll start with if we don't have the arm trap, because we're going to be in a situation where we've got this foot on the mat and we're trying to trap the arm. It may happen, it may not happen. But especially if I've got the double wrist control here and my partner is connecting their hands because they don't immediately want to be armbarred. Again, as we went through an earlier video, if someone's not connecting their hands, then the best thing to do is drop them into the hole and take their arm. But again, as I mentioned, the choke is the better option. So you may find yourself going up against someone who's got really good armbar defense, and even though that option exists, you don't want to take it. So if we find ourselves here, we're stepping with our kickstand against our partner's hip. We've created an angle so we're underneath our partner's shoulder. If our partner is not connecting their hands, it's usually going to be because they're keeping their hand very, very close to their neck. All right? So the first thing I want to show you, and this is a dig mechanic for the choke that will apply no matter where you're at. You could be on the strong side. It could be any form of back attack where we're able to keep our chin close to our partner's shoulder, and we can do it from a seat belt. But the idea is that something is usually going to be blocking here, and we need a way to get our hand in here. So we're going to make what I usually refer to as an arrowhead. So I'm going to take I believe this is my index finger. I'm going to place it around my thumb. So I'm creating a reinforced wedge that I'm going to drive underneath my partner's jawbone. Now, this is all fine and good. There's a bunch of different ways. Some people use the thumb, some people use the knuckle. Everyone's got a method that they use to get underneath the jaw. The problem with any of those, and all of them as far as I've found, is that the head is not braced. So as I'm moving, you can be absorbing the force I'm generating. So what we're going to do to affect limit that effect is I'm going to make like I'm trying to make out with Stephan. I'm going to put my chin.
I am so going to edit that out.
I'm going to put my chin right against his neck to create a brace, a frame, preventing his head from moving. And now I'm going to use that arrowhead. You can put your hand there, Stephan, you can tuck your chin in, and you're going to notice that it's really difficult, right, for you to stop that hand from coming in.
The presence of your head stops me able to move. And
it's not just because I can put my head here, and if I'm doing the same thing, you can still, anytime you can shrug your shoulders and move your neck, as we discussed in the armbar video, your joints can act as shock absorbers. So in this case, your neck is going to act as a shock absorber, moving around while I try to dig underneath your jaw. So I'm going to use my lantern-style rogue jaw here to create a brace so that you can't move your head. I'm also going to be using this top leg here to pinch you, to drive your entire body into that sort of bulwark so you cannot move. And then now that I've done that, I can get to digging underneath your chin. So this is not, again, it's not just weak side stuff, although it works particularly well on this side because my head is braced by the floor and by my own shoulder. Whereas when you go to like a neutral or strong side alignment, I'm relying on gravity to do it, which is fine, but I find that it's actually not quite as powerful. So, but you can use it everywhere. You can use it, we've used it a lot at our academy, just when we get to this sort of neutral position and then quickly getting through to here. So it doesn't matter how or when you use it, it's a method of getting under the chin and getting to the choke.
So it doesn't matter if you're sinking for the rear naked, for sort of a short choke, or
short choke, collar choke. It doesn't matter what the attack is. Collar choke, it's easy. The rear naked choke is the hardest because you got to go the farthest. But once you get that wedge mechanic going, it works pretty well.
So then what are the highest percentage chokes on the weak side? Like the actual choke?
So the one-armed rear naked choke, because I'm going to be, so one of the limitations of the weak side, and this is still, like I actually think pretty big limitation, is that if you want to trap this arm and just be super obnoxious, you can do it. So I have to cultivate a one-armed rear naked choke. In the gi, this is a little bit easier to do because I've offered so many places to grip. In no gi, I just have to grip your trapezius muscle or your scapula if I can reach it. All right, but let's assume, for instance, that I use my gi as an anchor point here. I'm going to be closing my elbow, but not just closing my elbow. I need to be driving my shoulder into your head. If all I do is close my elbow and I'm retreating my upper body, then there's no posture break and there aren't two walls closing in. So I want to be driving my shoulder in, anchored to my gi, and don't try to reach for your own shoulder. That's not really going to work unless you've got really long arms, and even then the angle is going to be wrong. So it's either my gi or your trapezius muscle shoulder. My head is in tight, my shoulder is coming forward, and I'm closing my elbow not just straight back, but down and then flexing. Another important note about chokes, especially with the rear naked choke, is don't squeeze early. Be as relaxed as you can be until you get exactly the position you want. It's kind of like putting the water into a hose. A hose is pliable when there's no water pressure in it. You can wrap it around nice and tight. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be as relaxed as I can, get as deep as I can with everything, and then I turn the pressure on, and hopefully that'll help you with getting a finish on that one-armed rear naked choke. In addition to the one-armed rear naked choke, if we're using this arrowhead style position, we get the grip on the collar. Right? We won't be able to usually get as deep as we would like. It's going to be a bit of a shallow grip, but the farther you can get around behind your partner's neck, the better. You're going to open the lapel up as much as you can to create this profile with your wrist. I don't want to try to choke you with this wide, thick top side of my wrist. I want to choke you with my radial bone. So when I go in here and I do that, I grab the collar and I rotate it. That exposes my wrist to that artery on the left side of your neck. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to find your opposite side lapel, and I'm going to try to zip it down as far as I can and push my head in as far as I can before I attempt to choke you. When I do go to choke you, this is where I would prefer to transition to the strong side. So, although it's quite finishable here, like this is absolutely, once I get this zip effect and start to squeeze my elbow, I can absolutely finish you. But for additional power, I would recommend reinserting this hook, stepping on the mat, hip escaping, finding myself on this side. What that's going to allow me to do is drop Stephan's head into this space between my elbow and my bicep and my shoulder. On the other side, I was kind of trapped in this alignment. Here, I now have a more effective posture break. As I create that zip effect, I can use way less energy and effort to finish on the choke here. All right, so we have two more chokes to go over, provided we have not trapped the arm, and then we'll go over what we're doing when we've got the arm trapped. So again, if I maybe started with my seatbelt, started to move to my double motorcycle grip, stepped on the hip, got myself to here, and then I used that arrowhead style dig and I got myself onto the collar. We just went over the double lapel choke, now we're going to go over the bow and arrow choke. If I've got this grip, I'm just going to extend out so that I can anchor the pants as close to the knee as I can. I'm going to start to pull up. I'm using that kickstand leg to angle my hip out just enough so that my shoulder can come in behind your neck. And now I'm going to use that stepping over the shoulder motion to cap off this side to start to push you away as I withdraw my right elbow and press my shoulder into the back of your head. Again, an important distinction here. There's nothing wrong with this version of the bow and arrow choke. I just find that it takes a lot more energy. And you don't want to burn your grips out if you have to have multiple matches. So if I'm able to get here, it's a more efficient choke mechanic. And then in particular, if I'm able to cap your shoulder off and push away, dropping the shoulder down, it tightens the noose even further. And then the other choke that we're going to use when we're finding ourselves without this arm trap is the reverse Ezekiel. So if we sit up for a second here, in particular, this goes very well with the half Nelson. So if I get to here and I'm using the half Nelson attack, I'm going to bring my arm around your neck so that I'm thumb deep. So if I make that kind of thumbs up position, again, if you've ever been to one of my seminars, usually especially when I teach leg locks, it's who's going to leg lock somebody? This guy. So in this case, it's going to be who's going to Ezekiel somebody? This guy. I point my thumb at me. I'm going to grab my sleeve, Different recommendations from different people as to how many fingers. I don't like putting 4 fingers in simply because it crushes my knuckles. 2 is what I found optimal. 3 is great. Whatever works for you. Like I said, I just don't like the restriction, especially if it's narrow sleeves that comes with 4. So 3 or 2 is great. I'm going to be hiding my elbow, but first I'm going to place my forearm on the back of your head. It doesn't have to go all the way through here like this. Again, I know a lot of people teach the Ezekiel like this. It totally works. But especially if you've got slightly either shorter limbs or narrower sleeves, this is going to be plenty. I'm hiding my elbow and finishing on the choke. So once again, I'm stepping on the hip, covering the hip, angling off, and I'm using the half Nelson motion here. I can also cover your head as I do it. Rule of thumb, thumb behind the neck, grab your sleeve. Place it behind the neck and start withdrawing your elbow as you go. This is another choke, by the way, that I would recommend finishing on the strong side. So if I were to find myself here, I'd be switching, angling off so I can build base. Let's rotate around the other side. So I'm angling off so that I can build base. This allows me now way more control with my shoulder to push your shoulder into your neck. It's a much, much more powerful finish on the strong side. I would venture to say that I never finish on the weak side, although I do know it's possible, but I've cultivated the habit of bringing my elbow into base, switching to the strong side, and I would recommend you do the same. I'm not saying you can't on the other side, but again, you can feel the difference when I drive that shoulder in and hide my elbow. It's a much more powerful choke. Okay, our final choke options are going to come off of when we have separated the arms and trapped the top arm with our, in this case, right leg. So let's say that I used the double motorcycle grip in this case. I angled my hip off so that I could stomp over your shoulder, and if your hands were connected, I'm trying to separate them and then tuck my foot underneath. When I tuck my foot underneath, what you'll notice is that I'm now able to bring myself back into a more conventional back control alignment. Normally with the weak side attacks, I'm pretty much underneath your shoulder, trying to control this lever, trying to break your posture, do all this stuff, create the angle to trap your arm. But once I have trapped your arm, staying here is not the best angle for the choke dig because, again, your neck can move around, and because I'm not creating any block here, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But once I bring myself back under here, and I can use that double or single motorcycle grip and bring my chin, and again, I'm trying to place the point of my chin right there and have the sides of my jaw fitting like a Tetris piece to block your head. Now that I've done that, it should be a relatively easy task to use that arrowhead to dig underneath. We can go double lapel choke. We can certainly go bow and arrow choke. My arm is already over. I sit up to do it. So again, I'm not doing this. This will work, but it's going to take more energy. So I'm keeping my shoulder behind your chin, sitting up as I withdraw your shoulder and withdraw my elbow, projecting my shoulder forward. If I'm looking for the rear naked choke, once I get here, in this case, because I have rotational control, I can adjust you enough to get the full rear naked choke. If I don't have this, it can be tricky to move. Like once I get under here, it can be tricky to move you enough to get this arm free. But once I have this arm trap, even if you're being fairly obnoxious, I can move you by using that lever to rotate you, pull my arm out, and go back to my rear naked choke, which I'm grabbing on bicep. In the gi, it's actually a really good idea to grab your sleeve as far around as you can get it and grab your gi up here. It's a more solid anchor point because, again, we're creating a closed circuit. In no-gi, obviously, you're not going to have the option of doing that. Grip as far around as you can, placing, ideally, your wrist in the pit of your bicep, not just gripping your bicep. This can slip. This is unlikely to slip. It's a more direct lever mechanic. And then here, I'm walking my fingers down my spine as I expand my chest and squeeze my head towards yours, bringing my elbows together to affect the choke. So those are our choke options. Bow and arrow, really easy. Rear naked choke, either one-armed or using the lever style to free my arm, and proper two-armed rear naked choke. All of those are extremely reliable finishes and what you should mainly be focusing on getting with this style of attack.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Rob. I think that was a really informative segment, and number of segments about the weak side. Let's just reiterate one more time, sort of like your if you're going against some guy, what helps you determine whether or not you're going to go strong side or weak side?
Yeah, absolutely.
In the back.
Body type, certainly. The more girthy somebody is, the less likely I am to go to the weak side. But other than that, it does come down to how they defend themselves. Some people have a style of defense that involves what we call at our academy, taking your ball and going home. Those people are not super concerned with getting out of a position. They're just concerned with not getting finished. In cases like that, if I go to the strong side and they just latch onto my arm as hard as they can, it can be a little bit more difficult because again, I'm applying direct control and I don't have the multiplying force of the lever. So in situations like that, I do find it helpful to bring them to the weak side, start attacking this internal rotation on this arm or creating a posture break here, and then I can work my attack series.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much.
No worries.
Obviously what you just saw is on YouTube, but it's part of a larger series on the weak side back attacks that Rob and I did together as an addendum to the BJJ Formula. So if you want that entire weak side back attack module for free, just download the Grapple Arts BJJ Master app at grapplearts.com/master app. Open up the BJJ Formula and you'll see the entire weak side back attack module with all the videos for free. You can download them, you can stream them, you can carry around in your pocket. You can get better jiu-jitsu as you commute to work.